2017 was a massive year for music. We saw the return of a lot of bands and artists that had seemingly been lost to time, as well as the formation of a ton of supergroups. However, there was a lot of music that certainly rose to the top. So this is the countdown for 2017's top 10 albums. Now, as always, these are not ordered in any sort of rank, so number 1 is not necessarily better than number 10 and vice versa. Without further ado, here's my list.
Number 10.
Number 10 is Rise Against with Wolves. Now, speaking of bands that made a huge comeback in 2017, Rise Against was one of those bands. It had kind of fallen off since really over 10 years now, or almost 10 years, with their last good album really being Appeal to Reason in 2008. Their follow-ups to those albums were just progressively less and less sharp. Their edge seemed to have been lost. They were not as aggressive as they had been. Seemingly the passion and the drive had been gone from the band, and Wolves just kind of brought everything right back to that, from the title track on the album, the emergency broadcast, the final track on the album. Everything in between was just absolutely fantastic. It was melodic, it was harsh, it was angry, it was loud, it was catchy. It was everything that we expect from Rise Against, and just everything that kind of felt like it had been lost in the previous albums as well. So it definitely feels like it deserves a spot on this, just for the fact that they managed to kind of let us know that they're still here, that they're still making music, and that they've not lost anything, despite, if you have kind of fallen off with them, definitely take a listen to this album. It's extremely recommended from me.
Number 9.
Number 9 is Joey Badass with All American Badass. Now, this is an artist I probably really haven't talked about a lot. I haven't actually reviewed this album, but let this stand as a review. This is a unapologetically black and just amazing album overall. He's dealing with things that a lot of rap artists aren't in this time period, especially within the mainstream. And he's not necessarily a huge mainstream artist. I mean, he's been featured on a lot of tracks from other bigger artists, but he hasn't had quite the success of other artists have enjoyed. But he really deserves it, because this album just, like I said, it's absolutely just in your face with everything. There's no punches that are held back. There's you know the issues that are being dealt with here. You know where he stands on things in terms of, I mean, right up there for a line, if you've got the guts scream "fuck Donald Trump," I mean, right there where he is and where he's at, and talks about the police brutality, white supremacy. They're just in a way, his flow with everything is just absolutely fantastic, and his lyrical content just mind-blowing at times. And I think he kind of gets overlooked by in terms of other artists, and I just think that this album was eye-opening for a lot of people, and it's just refreshing to see him not try to hold back anything or to make it suitable for a certain audience, things like that. And for that's why it ends up here on my list.
Number 8.
Number 8 is Greeley Estates with Calling All the Hopeless. Now, their last album, or last EP, Devil's Son, was extremely disappointing to me, especially after what I feel like was their peak with Narrow Road. Devil's Son kind of felt like it was a regression in terms of style and sound for the band. It felt like more of their early work that I didn't really particularly vibe with. It felt too simplistic. There was no style to it at all, versus their follow-up albums to that, which at least kind of which really blew my mind. But Calling All the Hopeless is a triumphant return for the band. I mean, it's got everything that we expect from Greeley Estates. Ryan Zimmerman is definitely at his best vocally here, as well as lyrically. There's a lot of dark content, and it feels very personal as a song, as a as an album goes, with dealing with things like taking care of a child, your responsibility, where you end up in life, not letting the past kind of define you. So I think they really did a great job coming back, and it is just an EP. It's not a full album, but I think it shows that they really still have it, and that I definitely hope this isn't just a one-off shot, and that we get to hear more from the band in the future.
Number 7.
Number 7 is dwsig with I Swear I'm Good at This. Now, this is a band I have talked about a lot on here and on my site. I did a written review for this album, and they're a band that just continuously surprises me with what they can do in terms of their sound. I mean, they are just a duo, guitar and drums, and they somehow seem so much louder and so much bigger than they actually are, and I love them for that. And this album especially is... Basically, if I talked about Joey Badass album being unapologetically black, this is unapologetically female, and I feel like she really talks about some of the things like she can't really be one of the boys anymore in terms of sucking it up and dealing with misogyny and just shit that women are expected to deal with in society today. And there's a lot of that. There's that's kind of what the basis of this album is. And also it deals with mental health issues, about not wanting to get out of bed but still wanting to do something, and kind of feeling like you've let down your friends, but also feeling like people kind of suck as well. So there's a lot going on in this album. I think it's very relatable, and again, in terms of the sound, it's just amazing to me what they managed to craft down here.
Number 6.
Number 6 is My Ticket Home with Unreal. Now, My Ticket Home is a metalcore band that has kind of progressed beyond that genre and beyond that term. I mean, they started off as a fairly kind of groovy metal rock band, and they've turned into something completely different, with their last album being absolutely rooted in the past, emulating bands like Edema or Linkin Park. With Unreal, they've kind of stepped things up, and they've kind of progressed past that early 90s style of nu metal to the more progressive stuff that we got from bands like Deftones in the early 2000s, early to mid 2000s, things like that. There's a lot of songs on here that I think really just have a ton of drive and passion, like Gasoline Kiss, for instance, is probably one of my favorite tracks, just of how it just feels kind of like a steam train going. There's a lot that they've kind of done to separate themselves from the genre, where the genre's headed these days, and by looking to the past, they've kind of done something that's unique and refreshing. So it's nice to see that they've stuck with that style, but still kind of progressed it further. And there has been this kind of whole nu metal revival that I think they've kind of kicked off and led. So it's nice to see that they're not set on just staying stuck in that style, that they're kind of pushing themselves forward. And it's nice for the genre, and it's great for the band.
Number 5.
Number 5 is Hodera with First Things First. Now, this is a band I've fallen in love with since their debut album, United by Bird Calls, came out in 2015. If you saw my review, my 1 year later of that album absolutely destroyed me emotionally, because it deals with a ton of things that I've gone through personally. And here we are again with First Things First, and they've managed to kind of expand on that and somehow go even deeper, dealing with depression, anxiety, taking meds, losing your mind, just a sense of worthlessness. And there's always this a sense of optimism at the same time within their songs, and everything is layered in stories and metaphor, and they just managed to craft this amazing life story throughout the album and throughout each of the songs, and something that they do very well that other bands tend to kind of lack. They don't have there's always a sense of purpose and the sense of seriousness, despite these songs being extremely catchy oftentimes, especially the first track they released off of here, North Dakota, which is probably one of my favorite tracks off of here, just because it almost feels like a pop song, but it's definitely not. It's darker. It's got a more serious tone to it. They absolutely have nailed what they need to do to capture an audience and to write an album, and it's definitely an album you do not want to miss.
Number 4.
Number 4 is Kesha with Rainbow. Now, I never thought that I would feature Kesha on a top 10 list of any kind here. And I know I kind of mentioned that in the review of I'm just amazed at how far she's come as an artist. And it's unfortunate the things that she went through to get here. I mean, her whole battle with DJ Luke, it just is atrocious to even hear about, and the fact that she wasn't believed and the fact that they were holding to her contract. And yet this album is what was kind of born from that, and you really get a sense of her kind of just flipping the middle finger to everybody. And especially with the song that she released, the title track, not title track, but the first single, Praying, which her vocal work on that is phenomenal. I mean, there's notes that people have tried to hit and absolutely cannot nail at all, but she laid it down here, and I like that feeling on this album. It kind of feels like it was recorded live. Some of the songs kind of start off with a little bit of an intro. There's not a whole lot of electronic manipulation on here. I mean, there's some auto-tuning on one or two of the songs here and there, but a lot of it's done in a stripped down kind of acoustic way, and I think that's kind of what she was doing. She's kind of bearing her soul for everybody on this album, and I just think that it holds up because it's not just a fantastic pop album, and probably one of the best pop albums ever made, and especially 2017, but it's really one of the best albums of 2017, and just for her as an artist to see that kind of growth that she's gone through. I mean, again, despite the circumstances, the unfortunate circumstances that led to this, it's just amazing to see that what she can do and what she can produce as a person and as an artist.
Number 3.
Number 3 is Tubbering with A Choice of Catastrophes. Now, Tubbering are a band I've been following since I saw them live in 2008, so it's been about 10 years since I discovered this band. And I mean, they just blew me away with their kind of blend of everything. I mean, you have metal, you have hardcore, you have mathcore, you have progressive metal, you have hard rock, you have show tunes. There's just everything kind of blended into, and they've done such a good job with that, and their lyrics have always kind of been silly and off the wall. It was kind of one of the fun things about the band. And their last album, which came out in 2007, 2010, was not that great. It kind of lacked the charm that their previous albums had kind of had there. So they kind of disappeared for a while, for almost 10 years, and then they came back with A Choice of Catastrophes. And I mean, the album just blew me away right from the get-go. For the first track they released, I mean, it's got a really heavy bass line. It's heavy on the electronic work, but the album is so diverse in terms of sound. I mean, from that track to there's like old-timey show tunes tracks. There's, like I said, there's kind of mathcore tracks on here. It's just got so much going on, and so much style is just oozing from this album. If you haven't checked this band out, I really suggest you do, and this would be a great place to start.
Number 2.
Number 2 is 100 Suns with the Prestalis. Now, this is one of those super groups that I mentioned, featuring former members of Every Time I Die, Dead and Divine, and the current vocalist of Norma Jean, Corey Brandon. And it's everything that should be in a super group. I mean, their sound is just over the top and large, and it doesn't feel like any particular band, but yet at the same time you kind of get a sense of all those bands mashed into one. It's a very, very heavy album overall. I've enjoyed it. It's progressive. It's got a moments of softness, like this December it's just an absolute fantastic song on there. It's Hallelujah is a heavier track on there, and I just really enjoyed it overall. I felt like they kind of needed to do something large and something big to break out, and I think that they've done that. I saw them live. I filmed it. You can see the video on my channel, and they were just absolutely stunning live. the songs almost sound even better live than they do on the album, and they sound great on the album. I mean, if you like any of those bands, you like anything like that, I really suggest checking them out.
Number 1.
Number 1 is AFI with their self-titled or Blood album. Now, AFI have always been one of my favorite bands, and they kind of went through a reboot of sorts with 2009's Crashla. They stripped out a lot of the theatrics and the electronic work and the harshness, and they gave us a kind of a pure rock or kind of post-punk album. They brought some of it back with their last album, 2013's Burials, and I felt like it didn't quite go far enough. It felt like they were kind of searching for a sound and they wanted to kind of dip back into their past, but didn't want to go too far forward and anything like that. And I think that it's a great album, but I don't think that it feels a little disjointed at times. However, the self-titled The Blood album just absolutely nailed what it means to be AFI, and I think they really dipped into their past, into their future, into their current sound, and it's just got everything on here. Songs like So Beneath You really kind of have this harsh kind of punk vibe. You have Davey Havok doing the unclean vocals again. You have weird kind of songs like She Speaks the Language, which just are so different for the band and yet sound so familiar at the same time. White Offering sounds like something that's straight off of Sing the Sorrow. The song Still Stranger is probably one of their catchier tracks on here. There's just so much going on, and they really just kind of nailed it and brought back everything. I think the band is really at their best, and it feels like this is an album they all wanted to make and they all put their heart and soul into, and just had a lot of fun with it overall, and weren't just trying to sound a certain way, but it came out like that. And it really just struck me and took me by surprise hearing the little snippets and then hearing the actual album as terms of, I think this is an AFI album for everyone. Thank you so much for watching the Top 10 Countdown for 2017. Those were my picks for the top 10 albums of 2017, but let me know what you think. What were your favorite albums? Did you agree with my list? Do you disagree? Leave me a comment down below letting me know. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel for more.